In this video, I'm going to burn some of the Qur'an. But first, let me tell you why I'm doing this. It is a protest against the UK government for allowing a citizen to be prosecuted for blasphemy against Islam. It is inappropriate for anyone to be prosecuted in any country for blasphemy against any religion, but most of all Islam. This prosecution was dressed up in the most feeble manner possible as a hate crime prosecution. A 19-year-old living in Leeds in Yorkshire loaded a video onto his YouTube channel in December 2014. In this video he took a copy of the Qur'an, he chewed it up, he dipped it in the toilet, and then he burnt it. People all over the world are doing the same thing. Here in the West, and also in countries such as Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia and Iran, where they are forced, on pain of death, to pretend to believe in Islam. A local Muslim police officer, Superintendent Mabs Hussain, took it upon himself to investigate this matter. There were many death threats against the kid on his YouTube comments. Hussain could find no law being broken by the religious fanatics making death threats, but he did manage to get the kid prosecuted for making the video. Members of the public were highly distressed by watching the video. It sort of leaves you wondering why Muslims are going on YouTube and watching Qur'an burning videos in the first place if they know how upsetting they're going to find the sight of burning paper. Bending laws purportedly for one purpose so they suit a very different purpose, i.e. imposing Sharia law on those who commit blasphemy, was a clear abuse of his position as a police officer. The overwhelming majority of people in this country, if given a choice in this matter, would ask for Mabs Hussain to be removed from a job he is clearly not suited to. Also, whoever in the CPS gave the go-ahead for this prosecution, most people would like him or her sacked too. We would like the kid in question to receive a well-deserved apology from the criminal justice system. We would like an assurance that there will be no repeat of this. A small, though admittedly fast-growing minority in our country want the government to prosecute those who insult their imaginary friend, or even more serious, his supposed messenger, a devious and sadistic serial killer, rapist and paedophile who has been dead for 1400 years. Mental health services should be dealing with the complaints of these religious cranks. Instead, our mental health services are being used as some sort of government customer complaints department, treating people for imagining ill treatment by government employees, whether it be kiddie fiddling or all manner of other abuses of position. I've printed out some of the Qur'an to burn. Don't know how that ham got there. It includes Surah 9, verse 29. I'll go into detail explaining what I find particularly offensive about that verse in a moment. I've already pointed out my original reason for spurring me into doing this. To let you know that by prosecuting that kid for burning the Qur'an, you invited 1,000 more of us to do it. Just to let you know that we don't accept this new rule that Sharia blasphemy law applies in the UK. We will not give undeserved respect to this sick, retarded crap. So now let's take a look at that verse that I mentioned. Chapter 9, verse 29 of the Qur'an. I'll restrict myself to only using Muslim sources here, no anti-Islamic websites. With each website I'll zoom into the URL address so you can check for yourself, and so you can see this is Muslims talking to other Muslims. This verse instructs Muslims to attack and murder Christians and Jews until they surrender and come under the control of Muslims and pay a form of tribute payments known as the jizya. People who don't think Islam is a problem tell us there are similar verses in the Christian and Jewish religious texts. There are 3 reasons why this is not a valid argument. Number 1. If it were true, and on close inspection it is not true, but if it were, that would not mitigate this. That would merely have made Christianity and Judaism worthy of criticism too. Number 2. The Qur'an is plastered with such verses, and it was the theme of Muhammad's later life to kill and enslave anyone who did not accept him as the messenger of God. Whereas the verses from the Bible people are picking on are from early on and are long since abrogated, no longer accepted parts of those religious traditions. whereas what we are criticising in Islamic doctrine is totally contemporary and law in every Islamic state now. Right now, not 2,000 years ago. Number 3. There is no parallel in the Bible for verses such as 929, 923, 9:4 to 9:6, etc. The Qur'an preaches aggression and conquest of the entire world, whereas the Bible only comes close to that when referring to the conquest of Canaan 3,500 years ago. Where people do find genuine similarities between the Bible and the Qur'an, it is in some of the Sharia law punishments, which are sometimes the same in Deuteronomy and Leviticus. I don't want to conflate too many issues here and allow room for confusion, but I have to mention this to show the falsehood of the comparison. This stuff is irrelevant in terms of my first point. We would criticise the Christians if they still killed people for apostasy as required in Deuteronomy 13, for example. This stuff is irrelevant in terms of my second point, in that the Christians no longer murder apostates. This stuff is irrelevant in terms of my third point, in that on the one hand, none of your similar verses touch on the militant aspects of the Qur'an. They only show similarities in terms of Sharia. And on the other hand, almost all of the similar sounding verses you can find don't actually say exactly the same thing when examined closely anyway. The Jews don't regard a woman being raped as consenting to illegitimate sexual conduct, for example. By convention, Muslims have always tended to mistranslate this verse, 929, so I will show you what it says in English, and also, after explaining its context, what it really says in Arabic. First, the context in chronological terms of chapter 9, verse 29. The Quran was most likely compiled in the 650s, more than 20 years after the death of Muhammad. At that time, the precise order of these verses were revealed in was not yet worked out, so the book is compiled in an almost random manner, with big chapters first and small chapters last. The order matters because according to Muhammad in chapter 2 verse 106, he said new verses abrogate older verses. This means if we see two verses which contradict each other, it is the latter verse which he wants his followers to obey. The first 29 verses of the 9th chapter were recited in the 10th month of the 9th year of Islamic history. This was some months after verses 30 to 129 were recited. What all this means is, there are only 3 tiny verses in the tiny 110th chapter in the entire Quran dated to after verse 29 of chapter 9, and they are merely speaking of how great it will be when Islam has conquered the whole earth. So there is no peaceful verse abrogating this verse which tells Muslims to attack unbelievers. Having dealt with that point, let's examine what it really says. We have to scroll past a lot of translations before we find an honest one. Why, on the odd rare occasion, do we find people who see the implication of killing in a word we are told merely means fight? Well, firstly, we know from Muhammad's own example of committing mass murders of prisoners on every occasion where he was able to do so, that boxing or wrestling was not what he wanted his followers to do with unbelievers. Also, the conventional word for fight is not what is seen here in the Quran. Here, a Muslim explains to other Muslims how killing can be associated with certain versions of the word fight. So what I just burnt is the most outrageous hate speech imaginable. Yet our thoroughly dishonest government would like to continue to lie to you and tell you it is a religion of peace, and that it is I who am the hate monger, not the guy telling his followers to murder and conquer non-Muslims. Those who control what is on television intentionally keep you in ignorance until the problem is too big for you to be able to do anything about it.